I'll start with the personal story, and then I'll end with the options for anyone who's an econ major or inclined in that direction, and then for details we can do that one-on-one. So I'm originally from Pakistan and was in a high school, HSN College in Lahore, and the three options I thought of was an MBA first, obviously at Harvard. It had to be Harvard, right? And possibly starting a consulting firm, and then maybe joining an international organization like the World Bank or the UN. So fairly ambitious. I ended up at the LSE and immediately became very radical because it was the times, early 70s, late 60s, and I jumped in with both feet and loved it, didn't do much work. But I did.
Just one thing?
Yeah.
Does everyone know what the LSE is?
London
The London School of Economics?
Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly. So much for the MBA. Went back to Pakistan and joined a think tank because I decided, probably research is what I'm going to do. And ended up being the lowest person on the totem pole, obviously, with a bachelor's degree. And realized if I was going to move anywhere, I'd have to get a PhD in research because I didn't really relish being pushed around by everybody else. So, which is what happens. So I scrounged around, got a master's scholarship to Williams College. The hitch was that it was a terminal degree. It was a master's in development economics. And once I was in there, I got a taste for study and for research. I wanted to do more. People at Williams were saying, yeah, but you got to go back. I said, I'm not going back. So they said, all right, try, see what you can do. And I got a scholarship. I managed to get one, but it was with a bond. I had to sign a bond to go back to Pakistan. Well, since I'd intended to go back to Pakistan, that wasn't a big deal. So I started my graduate studies at the University of Michigan and met an old friend who I'd met at the think tank at Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, who was now assistant professor at Northwestern. And he said, so what do you want to do when you finish your doctorate? I said, well, I'm thinking of starting a consulting organization in Pakistan. He said, they're horrible. They're rapacious. You don't want to go there. So he said, what else? I said, well, maybe an international organization. He said, yeah, but they're very bureaucratic. Do you really want to be in a bureaucracy? So I said, well, I don't know. Well, I'll get my doctorate first and then maybe I'll think about it. So I did. And while I was a graduate student, I got an offer from the World Bank. And I was thinking, oh God, I mean, very tempting, good money, research, I thought. And he said, no, you don't want to do that. You'll be a bureaucrat. You won't really do any research. So anyway, I'd also be a bond jumper. And I didn't want to be a bond jumper because, I'd signed a contract. So I went back and decided I liked research a lot. I didn't like my boss. Horrible man. Horrible. And so I decided I didn't want bosses. I definitely didn't want bosses. I mean, I needed independence. So I figured, and I liked research. I also actually married someone in graduate school who was from Indiana, and she didn't like Pakistan too much. So when we finished my bond, she said, I want to go back. And I said, okay. Well, 4 years of research had given me enough publications so that I got a job. I spent 5 years in Vassar College, and we raised some kids. And there was family issues. Family issues, I needed to go back to Pakistan. And she said, all right, but only 5 years. We stayed here 5 years, no more than 5 years. I said, okay. So I became the executive director of research, a think tank called Sustainable Development Policy Institute, had an environmental orientation. And I discovered I was actually a pretty good boss. Even though I didn't like bosses, I was gentle and kind. So that worked quite well. I also love to nurture young people. And so I was able to to nurture quite a few people who've become good researchers and academics. But then 9/11 happened. By this time, my wife had joined the UN, and she was UN Afghanistan. And that burnt her out badly because she was a public information officer and a lot of exposure to the press. And after 4 years, 4 months, she said, oh, I've got to go back. So I said, okay, yeah, but I'm old now. I'm not going to get a job. She said, yeah, but try. So I got a job at the University of Utah. She was in UN headquarters in New York City. And that long distance relationship, we shared kids, one with me, one with her. And but this wasn't going to work long term. So I looked around the East Coast and I got a job at Holyoke College. And I was a visitor there for the last 6 years before I became Copeland at Amherst. What I did discover is if you leave before getting tenure, it's very hard to come back in. So any of you who want to be in academics, do your time, get your tenure, then go. Not a good idea to come back and think you're going to be high-flying because it's hard, generally. And so I do know that as an economist, there are many, many doors that are likely to open in government, in business, think tanks, banks, international organizations, and of course, where my heart is, academia. And I can give you advice, particularly with the UN, because my wife works there, and so I've taken notes from her on how, if anybody is interested in getting a career, you do need a master's, but I can give you a 1 page of what else to do. If you want, I can email that to you. Okay, so more one-on-one there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, good.
5 minutes?
Perfect.
About.
I was just so engaged, the clock didn't matter. All right, Chris, go ahead.
Okay, if you're watching mine,
I'll take
they
care
both
of
go
it.
black, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Usually I stand up. I just can't give a presentation sitting down, but because we're sitting in a circle, it seems natural to sit.
You want all of us to stand?
Yeah, if we could all sit.
For 5 minutes, we can do that.
I have 5 minutes. I'll give you a narrative, and then during Q&A, you can maybe fill in some of the gaps. I graduated in 1987. In 1992, when I was 5 or 6 years older than some of you, I started reading in the newspaper about a war in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and southeastern Europe. I read about innocent people being butchered just because they had the wrong last name. I could see through news reports that there were people of different cultural groups that just wanted to live together in peace, and that there were fascists, ultranationalists, who were murdering them day in and day out while Europe and the United States sat on their hands. And this war went on for 3.5 years. I read in the newspaper each year, each day, about all these mass murders. I remember where I was when the Bihać pocket started to fold, which doesn't mean anything to you. But you might have heard of Srebrenica, where 8,000 men and boys were taken away in buses over a few days and butchered. I remember where I was when that was happening. And I kept waiting for the West to do something. In 1995, there was a massacre in a city called Tuzla, where about 70 young people were killed all in one moment. I work now in Tuzla, and I know some people who survived that massacre. So in 1995, I called the Bosnian embassy in Washington, and I was just me, and I said I want to help. And I felt like I was offering my teacup to the Titanic, but I wanted to help. They referred me to an organization. I went to a conference. I met the Bosnian ambassador to the United States, Sven Altschuler, and I was given a film called Miss Sarajevo, which I watched in February of 1996. And for the first time, I could see that it really was just Europeans, just people like you and me, who were being butchered. And that night I called my bookkeeper, who was the mayor's campaign manager, and I just said, Sue, I have to do something, and I want to meet with the mayor tomorrow. So I went to meet with the mayor of Newburyport, Massachusetts, and I told Lisa that I'm going to bring the Bosnian ambassador to our city, and I want you to welcome him. And I organized an event where everyone could see this film and see what was happening, or had been happening in Bosnia. One thing led to another. I got on a plane in December of 1996, and I flew to Zagreb, Croatia. I had 2 duffel bags, a backpack, I had thousands of dollars in my boots. I got on a bus that's like a Greyhound bus, that kind of size bus, and at this time the war had ended. 60,000 NATO-led troops had intervened and separated the opposing armies. There was still some shooting, a little bit of mortar fire, but it was isolated. And I had learned that this bus route into northeastern Bosnia was relatively safe. So I got on the bus, and I went across the Sava River where there was no bridge because it had been blown up. And that was my first moment when I really understood this is quite real. Because you're in a big bus and you're floating across in a barge, and there are no portholes or escape hatches. And when the bus got on the barge, it got stuck on the mud, so it had to lunge forward. And then I saw M1 tanks, and I saw Bradley fighting vehicles and pillboxes and machine guns. And I showed up at a bus station on December 14th, 1996, with just me and a dictionary. And I had the intention of helping. I actually didn't want to be part of any organization. I just wanted to learn from Bosnians how I could help. I thought it was going to be something I did in the winters, but I saw some things that are just I can never shake. And the only thing that makes sense to me now for the rest of my life is to do everything I can to help them. And it's very difficult for me to talk about because given the course of history, things have not been progressing very well the last couple of years. Fast forwarding to today, Bosnian colleagues and I have established a nonprofit organization. The largest grant we've received is $135,000 from the World Bank. I've worked with representatives. I can tell you a lot about what it's really like over there from the Bosnian point of view. But I've worked with U.S. soldiers, I've worked with representatives of the World Bank, Soros Foundation, all the international organizations there. I'm a little bit of an irritant to them because I can be. But they sometimes need an irritant like me to kind of get them to do some things. I've also, with American colleagues, established a nonprofit in Ithaca, New York. And together we really are making a difference. We do very, very practical projects. Once a Bosnian said to me about nonprofits, if all you're going to do is talk, don't talk to me. They're really sick and tired of talking. They want real, actual, practical solutions. So I actually work with Amherst College now and Yale and Harvard and Cornell and other top-notch schools, bringing students to Bosnia to teach very practical skills each summer. We deliver baby chickens and chicken food to women returning to their pre-war homes to give them a sustainable source of income. And we have some more ambitious projects that maybe I can talk about. But when I talk, I have no idea how much time has passed.